psalmist, community activist, visionary, an award-winning sermon builder, are a few titles to describe a special gift to this world, known as Timothy Flemming Sr.
Power. He's the most powerful young man ever come through this city preaching the gospel.
He was the talk of the town and still is.
I call him Little Timothy, but Timothy Flemming is his name.
He's a great hooper. And but the other thing that I remember about it is he didn't hoop on empty phrases. He hooped on solid information and determination. I remember back in the 80s, we were having a campaign to take our money out of banks that didn't serve us appropriately and put it in black banks. And I remember Pastor Flemming was one of the first churches that put a sizable deposit in the Citizens Trust Bank, and we were very grateful to him. I wasn't surprised because that's the kind of person he is.
Well, the Reverend Dr. Timothy Flemming, a friend and preacher and singer, and just really a good man. And you have to be good. You have to really almost be a saint to survive in a Baptist church for 40 years. But after you made it, you know, the first year, and moved into this beautiful church, and you really lit up our neighborhood. And every time I have been to your church services, I get inspired. I mean, you really, what do you call it? You're a double hitter. And you can hit the ball out of the park preaching, and if you swing it that hard that day, you can knock it out singing when you get through. I always feel good about myself and about the gospel. Maya Angelou used to say that very few people will remember what you say, and even less what you do. But people will always remember how you make them feel. And when you get out of church at Mount Carmel, you feel good. You feel lifted up. You feel like you're closer to God, and whatever burdens you brought to church that morning, you have lifted to the heavens and set your members free. And so all you have to do is keep on keeping on. You are a blessing to this community, and you're a good friend, and I thank you just for being who you are. So God bless you.
He's someone that I knew very, very well, because my father used to always say, "What if you need something, and call Pastor Flemming, call Pastor Flemming," and he would come to the dinners, and he would have this like entourage with him, and he would come in, and he was sharp as a tack, unless he decided to wear his overalls and a red shirt, which he and my dad were twins in. And he would just minister to the people and just become one of them. I mean, he was not afraid of them. He was not afraid of how to talk to them. He had compassion and has compassion in his heart for a guy that's just had a bad road, just had a bad hiccup in the road and trying to get himself together. He knew immediately that these were not people at Jose Feed the Hungry who were lazy or who had some mental issues or even were addicted to drugs, just guys that had a bad bump in the road. And he would speak to them that way. He never spoke down to them. One of the things that I remember is that he always seemed so comfortable, that I could feel comfortable with him. And he never ever seemed like he was talking down to people, even though he could have, because he's certainly an icon in the city. I mean, he is Atlanta.
He is such an extraordinary presence, a great preacher, a great father, but also a great friend. And I've benefited so many ways from his wonderful ministry. Through trials and tribulations and through greatness and through great sadness, this man has been a dear friend of mine. I can say from the heart that his incredible preaching has touched my life, touched my heart, and really made such an incredible difference for the people of Atlanta, whether in Summerhill or here in Campbellton Road or throughout the city of Atlanta. His special brand of preaching, the way that he touches people and sings to them and talks to them, I think really represents the ultimate in ministry.
Timothy Flemming is a special anointing from God. You can see it coming up, especially when he takes you back to them campground meetings. You just see him in there every February, brings it back during Black History Month. Wade in the water. You all haven't seen him, you got to see it. That CD, that pictorial, that trip back to where we come from as an African American race, we've made it through those gospel songs, through those old songs. You see, another thing is, like Timothy Flemming, I come from back there. I come from Aner, South Carolina, a little old tobacco farm. And when he was there going through them Camp Creek, I was there. Elizabeth Baptist Church in Aner, South Carolina with my grandmama. I was raised with my grandparents. That's what kind of man Reverend Timothy Flemming is. Beyond that, he's not just a preacher. He's not just a singer. He's a teacher, and he is a spirit-filled person. You can't walk into Mount Carmel and listen to Reverend Timothy Flemming and not walk out feeling you're gonna conquer. Whatever ailed you when you came in, you will feel much better when you walk out.
I met Pastor Flemming several years ago when I became tax commissioner. He was one of the first persons who reached out to me when I became tax commissioner. I found him to be a minister who cared deeply about his community. To him, community is ministry. Several years ago, he came to me and wanted me to help him bring services to this community. It was a time when McDonald's had moved out of this community, which is not a very good thing. It was also a time when small churches were leaving for their suburbs to make mega churches. But Pastor Flemming stayed the course here. administering and giving solace to the community in a time of need. Remember, after we met, we went into a big recession, and there was a lot of pain in the community. And he helped to minister to his community during that time. He stayed the course. Let me just say that, Moses wandered the desert for 40 years. Pastor Flemming stayed here for 40 years. He stayed the course. And that is a very, very telling tribute to him. I would just like to say that I wish him many, many more years of service to this community, ministering to this community, and saving souls in the community. And he could always count on me as a friend who would do everything I could do within the law and my authority to help him. I wish you all the luck, Pastor Flemming. Thank you, and good luck to you.
My name is Paul Howard, Fulton County District Attorney. My brothers and my sisters, it is with great honor and humility that I am called upon today to say a few words about my friend, my leader, and my hope for a bigger and better Atlanta, Georgia, Reverend Timothy Flemming. Pastor Flemming, on behalf of the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, I would like to congratulate you on your 53 years of labor as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Over the years, you and I have had a number of discussions about keeping our community safe. But I want to remind your members and your friends of something that they know already. Because Reverend Flemming doesn't just talk about keeping the community safe, but he does something about it every day. He calls the governor, calls senators, congressmen, city councilmen, and county commissioners. But he also calls the district attorney. He calls him several times, early in the morning and late in the midnight hours. Pastor Flemming has held more public safety meetings at Mount Carmel than any other church in Atlanta. He has made it clear he will not rest until his community is well educated, sparkling clean, and crime-free. My friend, I salute you and I love you, and I cannot wait until your 50th anniversary seeing you preaching and singing in those blue overalls.
Hello, my name is Charles Steele Jr., President and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, co-founded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other ministers and leaders in the civil rights movement. I'm here to commend and to compliment and to let the world know that Dr. Timothy Flemming is a very good friend of mine. Had it not been for Dr. Flemming, SCLC would not be in business today. Dr. Flemming was one of the few who came to the aid of my leadership in SCLC and provided us the finances to keep the doors open. After we paid and built this building, for whatever reason, we got an indebtedness that Dr. Flemming came to the table when SCLC building was about to be foreclosed. I want to say thank you, my brother. Thank you to all of the work that you do and your great leadership there at Mount Carmel Missionary Baptist Church, and to your congregation. And to the congregation, I want you to know that Dr. Flemming is a gift from God for you and for the leadership, not only at Mount Carmel, but through the metropolis of Atlanta, Georgia, and throughout the world. This is my friend, this is my leader. Dr. Flemming, we could not make it without you.
It is a great honor to be among all the people who will speak a special word in tribute to Pastor Timothy Flemming and 53 years of preaching, having started at the age of 11. I was very pleased to have him as a student at Morehouse. He did very well. He sent us two of his sons, Arik Sr. and Jr. I have Arik Jr. in my class now. The city of Atlanta, indeed our nation, should be forever grateful to Pastor Flemming for his wonderful contribution of helping archive and preserve the folk religious music of Black Americans. Our ancestral heritage is in good hands. To serve anywhere for 40 years is an achievement of dedication, commitment, and the capacity to lead. For he could not have stayed at Mount Carmel all those years if the people had not affirmed what he was doing. It's a real pleasure to watch him on TV in his overalls, taking us back to the days of segregation. I recall the 1940s. Being a native of Dawson, Georgia, I can remember all those wonderful spiritual sounds. And it's important that we not lose that. And so his having led Mount Carmel's congregation in building a very impressive and imposing church edifice and having a national and an international ministry is worth celebrating. I hope that this day will cause you to walk down the highest halls of human happiness and never doubt that your contribution has helped brand the city of Atlanta in a very affirmative and positive way.
Born in Macon, Georgia, little Timmy grew up in the projects, 7 of 8 kids.
Well, when I was born in a place they called the Project, and Tender Heights Project. And in those days, if you were living in the project, you were living pretty well off, because most of the homes were wooden homes and some people had fireplaces. But when you're in the governmental projects, in those days, they were nice brick homes. We had running water. Believe it or not, we would feel like we were privileged to be in Tender Heights Project. There were some well-to-do people living in Tender Heights Project. I remember Otis Redding. I used to hear them when he was playing his band in rehearsals. I recall the days when he was practicing and I was a little boy. We were calling the police because they were making so much noise with the band. And I didn't know that was Otis Redding until later years. And there were some well-to-do pastors living in the project at that time. In fact, that's how I met my own pastor, Reverend J.J. Jordan. He was our next door neighbor in the project. We grew up in a family of 8, because when you have a lot of children, you could qualify to live in the project. And that's how I grew up, with running water, bathroom, and things that we have today. And they were brick building. And I remember so much about playing around that pecan tree when I was a baby, little boy. And I went back to Macon and it's still there. Brings a lot of memories about the project and how privileged I was to be raised up in the project at that time. Of course, they look now at the project to be something different. But in that day, it was a great honor to have been raised up there in Tender Heights Project. And a lot of people think when you say Macon, well, I was more like a city boy. More the country would be out where you saw hogs and cows and chickens. You couldn't raise those things in the city of Macon. So I was like a downtown city boy. I could walk from Tender Heights Project downtown. And at that time, Macon downtown was really exploding. I mean, everybody was coming from the little small towns to come to Macon on the weekend, because they had hotels and a whole lot of other things going on down on the main streets where only most black people could go. They had pool rooms and a lot of other things open up at night right next door to Douglas Theater, which was the only black theater we had in Macon, where most of the celebrities like Lena Hornes, I was told, and Ethel Waters would come there and perform back in the days when my daddy said he used to go to Douglas Theater. So all the activities of the black were around downtown, and on Mondays, you would see a lot of people going downtown to cash a check, and on Fridays and Saturdays, you couldn't even get through. It was so many people coming from those little small towns, so Macon downtown was like Atlanta. And that was the privilege. It was like it is. In fact, we had buses coming in and out of Macon, going all different routes. And people would line up when they were getting on their jobs and off their jobs at 5 o'clock or 9 in the morning. It would be a line of people just getting on your bus, bus number 2, bus number 3, and all those places where the buses were taking you different route. It was like a city. So I didn't see cows and chickens and animals like that until I was a boy preacher and went out to preach in those little country towns. And I was so excited when I saw the first hog. I won't forget, I was running a revival as a little boy, and I had to stay with the members. In those days, we could not stay in hotels. They were not integrated. So we had to live with members of the church. And I remember seeing a hog, I won't forget it. I was running, chasing hogs in the daytime, beating the hogs, and the hog was running. I was excited as a boy living with this old couple. And one time a hog turned around and went to chasing me, and I was running, and I never will forget that day, but I saw a hog and I was excited. So Macon, those days were very bright and exciting times in my childhood. My father made good money. He was a chef cook. He was a very, very good cook.
He couldn't read or write, but Ransom Flemming was one of the finest cooks in Macon.
My mother, my darling mother, I was something like being next to the baby. I was mama's boy. I was fat long then, would you believe it? They used to call me fat.
In a crowd, Timothy Flemming blended with the other children.
Well, he was a bad little boy, I'll tell you the truth.
I remember a young man named Ira Johnson. I won't forget him. Though I was a preacher, I was bad if you mess with me. So Ira Johnson, telling the truth, I was a bad little boy because he was messing with me. I was a child. I was a kid. I liked to play. And sometimes I remember preaching at a church somewhere in Jeffersonville, Georgia, when I met Ira Johnson. And Ira Johnson was playing with me. I had to preach. The church was packed, but I got there early, and I wanted to play. And we got out in the backyard, here I am with a suit on, and got all dirty wrestling. And he did something to me, and I said, boy, I'll give you a knuckle sandwich. So I brought my fist up to fight it. He didn't know I was the preacher. And we were wrestling, and after a while, when I was about to fight him, a lady walked out, "Little Timothy, what are you doing out here in this dirt?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm just playing with this boy making me mad." She said, and she said, "The church got to, you know you got to preach. Don't you know better to be out here wrestling?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. Stand up here." And she knocked the dirt off me. And I was looking, "That the preacher?" She said, "Yes, and what you doing with him out here wrestling?" She said, "He wanted to wrestle me." And guess what? When I went to the pulpit and got up there, a whole different man. And he was astonished. I sound like an old man. I said, "Now turn your Bibles to such and such a thing. And I'm going to preach today." I changed. I was not a little boy after that. Something came on me in the pulpit, and I sound like an 80 or 50-year-old man.
But as he grew up, the spirit inside of him began to show up.
My boyhood life as a preacher started when I was a little boy, must have been about 6 years old, going up into the bathroom preaching. As I said many times, I really didn't know what preaching was, but I just knew I felt I could preach. And I used to go up there in the bathroom upstairs and lock up when I was about 6 years old or 7, and I would be up there just preaching. Because I'd heard a preacher one time, and I heard him preaching. I saw preachers on TV when Sunday morning would come, and I felt like I could do that. And I went up there in the bathroom many, many times when I didn't think nobody was home. And I would lock the door, and I'd be up there preaching. I was literally preaching around 6, 7 years old. But I did not know my sisters or anybody was downstairs listening, or I probably wouldn't have gone up there to do that.
We'd be outside playing Saturday, go around sunshine, little games and things. And Mama said, come here, go upstairs. We said, go upstairs what? Go up there and get that boy. When he would go in to shut up, to pray, we would hear him or in the bedroom, and I would go and just say, Mama, he up there doing that again. But when Dad come home, I said, Dad, he's crazy. Because nobody's in the room with him. He's in there talking to himself. Who is he talking to in there? And I said, Daddy, you better whip him. You got to whip him.
But not even a whipping could stop that fire shut up in young Timothy's bones.
In those days, not having a father preaching, no mentor anywhere, no uncle, nobody. I heard my great-granddaddy was a pastor or something like that, Chef Ferguson or something like that. I didn't know preachers. I didn't have any preacher to mentor. So the only thing I know, we would see preachers on TV, mostly white, Jimmy Waters, I believe, Mabel White Baptist Church, won't forget, every Sunday morning he was on TV, and we would get up and all we could see was him, and I would see preaching. And that's when the preaching became more a part of me, that I felt I could do what he did when I was locking up in the bathroom. And at this age now, if you ask me more about it, I would say it was God. Nobody but God, because there was nobody in the house for me to patronize. Nobody wasn't going to church in my house but my mother, some dying primitive Baptist. My daddy didn't go to church. I don't remember sisters and brothers going to church. I don't know nobody in the family, uncle, cousin, nobody was a preacher. So I wonder where it came from. And that's what occurred to me. I met Miss Pearl when I was a baby, and she lived right in front of us. And you know, I can see it with all sincerity from my heart. Mama used to tell me about when I was a baby, how women would come over there trying to take me with them places as a baby. They say I was a cute little old baby, whatever the word they said. Because I had 2 dimples in my jaw, and I was a little fat boy. And women used to kiss all over me and make me so mad when I was just about 6 years old. And they would come over there and get me, want to take me home and just let me just take him home or be with him, and they would feed me to death, give me all the cookies and milk. And Miss Pearl had a daughter named Agletus, and they kind of took a liking to me like that. I was used to it, women kissing all on those dimples. I hated dimples, I hated them. And Ms. Pearl, a beautiful woman, would invite me over with her daughter. And I won't forget, I love those sweet peaches in the jar. And they would give me those peaches out that jar when I would come over there, and I would eat them, and then I would go back home. That's when I met Miss Pearl. Then I met her husband, Reverend J.J. Jordan, which I didn't know then would soon become my pastor to baptize me. So Miss Pearl played a great part of my life. When I was starting to preaching as an 11-year-old boy, I didn't know nobody to be with but my pastor, Reverend J.J. Jordan. Of course, they had moved out of the project, and we had moved out of the project then. And I went to her because he would take me around when I started preaching, Reverend J.J. Jordan. That's how I got known. Somebody told him, you got to take him around with you. he doesn't have no guardians. So on Sundays, I would go over to his house, walk over there. I would walk to his house, maybe 2 or 3 miles. And I would go to church, walking down the Dusty Road, Dempsey Avenue now, I remember that. And I would sit on the porch, and Reverend Jordan was partially blind. He could not see very well, but oh God, he could preach. Not being able to see well, his wife had to read him the Bible. And I would sit there and see him reading. She reading the Bible to him, Miss Pearl. And he would sit there and just read, right? He couldn't write because he couldn't see. He would memorize what she would read for him. I was listening to that. So when she got through reading the Bible to him, I would tell her, I want her to read the Bible to me. He would walk off then. And I know we'll forget one of the first one, Jesus walking on the water. And I was so excited about it. I remember then that Bible teacher showing me those pictures of Christ and feeding the 5,000. And I said, can you find that and read that for me? You gotta remember, I'm only 11 years old. She would read it, and that's all I needed. She said, you got it? I said, I got it, Miss Pearl.
I am the one who started teaching him to read the Bible. He would come to my house. He might come anywhere he could get there. But I didn't let him walk home. If I couldn't call a taxi, I would give him bus fare. And he would slip. We lived back to back in the project. And he would slip over to my house a lot of times, go upstairs and get into things, but I didn't ever get angry with him. He was always a little humble child. And I knew that he was one of God's little angels when he was born. And I always cared for him. Did he tell you where he started at? Ross Street Baptist Church. And my niece, Ruby Watson Sample, got his things ready for him to be baptized. She brought them to the church, and he baptized him, Reverend Jordan did.
When you said preaching, all I'm thinking about an old man preaching, but a child preaching, I said, I gotta go see this.
And so did everyone else in Macon. Timothy Flemming was the preacher boy on the box.
I cannot believe what I did at 11 and 12 years old, getting on a bus, Trailway bus station by myself, with a little Bible and a little briefcase, going out of town alone. I look at it now, this doesn't make sense. By myself, that brave. And I counted up, the last time when I was a teen, I counted up, I had traveled 139 cities in the state of Georgia, and there's only 159. I was going every weekend. I would get on the bus, get my ticket, go. They had to meet me when I got off the bus. The people would pick me up Saturday. I would spend the night with them. They would take me in the churches where I would preach on Sundays were just packed. People came just to see me.
My name is Bernice Lawson. Oh yes, I remember Reverend Flemming when he used to catch the bus. Matter of fact, that was his first journey when he left from Macon, Georgia in 1964. At that point in time, he should have been at least, I would say, 12 or 13 years old. Matter of fact, we all was kids, and we met up on third Sundays, you know, at church, St. James Baptist Church, matter of fact. And we all was the kids. We did youth service. I remember our first song. We would always sing, Jesus Keep Us Near the Cross. And then when he attempted to get up, he always had one song that he would always sing. Matter of fact, at that time, he only knew 2 songs. He was not a singer. He was just a preacher. So every third Sunday, we would fellowship together, the kids in the community. This lady named Miss Gladys Rispers would go to Macon. She would get him on Saturdays, bring him out, let him spend the night. We all lived in the same neighborhood, was in walking distance. He'd spend the night, and he preach on Sunday, and she'd go back and take him on Greyhound bus back to Macon. So he did that for at least for about 2.5 years. During the summertime, he would always come out and minister to us. And one day, he had left church, and my grandmother was sitting out on the porch, and she had had a stroke. And she was never able to come out the house, but this particular day, she was out on the porch, and she looked and she said, she saw him walking, going to the lady's house. Matter of fact, we had outside toilets and all this, and just as he approached that area, she says, that child is going somewhere. She said, he gonna be something one of these days. She said, I never heard it, I never seen it, but I'm witnessing it now, that a child is preaching. And she said, you all, because no one was standing there with me, she said, you all need to follow him because he can teach you something and you'll learn something. And here I am today. After all those years, I'm here in Atlanta, still listening and ministering with the little boy that we would thought would ever go anywhere. Now he been all over the world, and that's what she said. One of these days, he is going to minister to the world. And she says, before I leave from here, I want you all to get in touch with his pastor, which is Reverend J.J. Jordan. And I want him to do my eulogy for me because I'm not going to live long. And at that point in time, I just stood there and I listened because I was about 11 myself. I wasn't that old myself. And so I listened to her. So she said, get with Gladys, make sure that y'all tell her this. Give him our phone number. And that's what we did. And about 6.5 months after that, my grandmother passed away. And guess what? His pastor, J.J. Jordan, did do her eulogy. So I'm here to say today, when she was saying that, I never thought she was looking at me as being an angel. Here to still witness and be able to testify. And I'm glad that the pastor thought of this because this been on my heart for ever since I was a child.
I remember sometime in the afternoon, I had to have me back on that bus that evening. I would see cars everywhere, and I've seen people when I was preaching on the box, standing up there, I saw people passing out like I never seen. It would scare me, they would shout so. I saw one lady, I won't forget, in Columbus, Georgia, she hit the windows of the church, screaming, fell out, and cut herself all up. And after church, I was looking at this lady, and they said, you going to the doctor? She said, no, they just wrapped her. They wrapped her up. And she said, I'm not going to the doctor. And she just cried and cried and cried when after church. And I've seen people just pass out. And I could preach then 12, 13, and I could sing on the floor. And guess what my song was? My song was, you don't know what the Lord told me. And people didn't believe no boy preacher. And I get out and say, you don't know what the Lord told me. You don't know what the Lord told me. You don't know because you weren't there. You don't know when and you don't know where. You don't know what the Lord told me, and they will fall out everywhere screaming. I didn't think about it. Now, I was protesting about people who said, I don't believe in no boy preacher. And those were the days that I discovered I could sing, not a soloist, and I became a master in my teen in revivals on the floor singing old camp meeting songs because I heard them at my mother's church. And I could get on the floor and go to walking and stomping, and that made me a revivalist. Those were the days of a boy preacher.
So, Pastor, tell us about the first time that you heard the voice of God.
Two things happened in my life that gave me the assurance that I was not faking and playing with the ministry. After preaching for about a couple of years, I started wanting to hear God's voice, and I started praying to God, did you call me to preach? I'm not sure. I said, Lord, please let me see something and let me hear something. I would fall all on the floor crying, God, please, I haven't heard your voice. Where did this come from? And I need to be sure. People say I'm too young to preach, and old people were criticizing that boy out there preaching and he don't know what he's doing. And something happened. I was preaching one night at New Bethel Baptist Church on a Thursday night. The Reverend R.L. White's daddy was the pastor. Well, no, before his father came the pastor of New Bethel, Reverend Scott. I remember Reverend Scott was the pastor of New Bethel Baptist Church. I was to preach that night, and the pulpit that night was full of preachers. Very few people in the audience, but the pulpit full of preachers. When I was sitting there getting ready to preach, I know what I saw. I saw the image of a man coming from way back in the roof ceiling of the church. It was a figure of a man like a shadow. It was coming so fast I wondered did anybody else see it. I saw it in the ceiling and it came straight down the aisle and went straight in me. And I shook like that. And the preacher looked over me and said, you all right, son? I said, yes, sir. And I just shook. I know what I saw. That night, for some reason, I preached like I never preached before. And what's so strange, all the preachers were shouting, and the people in the audience were not even moving. I went home and told a little lady about it. She said, God showed you something. I said, but that ain't enough, but I know what I saw. I don't care who believes this. I kept asking God, I want to hear your voice. And one night, it must have been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, my brother was in the bed, all of us were in the bed, and I heard something says, Tammy. I jumped. It was like a voice I never heard. I thought my brother was messing with me. I looked over at my brother with pitch black dark. He was snoring, and my other brother was asleep. I got so scared. I looked around. I got back in the bed, and I didn't hear nothing no more. And I went and told this lady who used to read the Bible to me, Miss Bentley, 2 other people. I heard a voice of somebody. I thought my brother was messing with me, and I knew it was God. And this preacher said, did you answer him? I said, no. He said, you should have answered him. and said, "Here am I." I became very silent. I never heard. I'm shaking now while I'm talking about it, believe it or not. Excuse me. I knew God was talking to me. And I'm sorry I didn't say nothing. So my childhood preaching was so strange. That's why I can stand so firmly now. Nothing could stop me from preaching. I would die preaching because he did speak to me that night, and I never heard a voice so peaceful, and it was a whisper. I know it's a God. So I didn't mean to break down. I never did this before to talk about it. I had the assurance that God is real. I became, after that, the preachingest little boy you ever see.
He caught the eye of these two ministers. Their support was vital to his ministry because in those days, boy preachers had it hard. Reverend F.J. Jackson was the first to spot him at the neighborhood barbershop.
I met him at Reverend Odom's barbershop one Saturday morning, and he was there, cold and chilly in a big old overcoat. You couldn't hardly see him for the overcoat. So Odom said, "You heard about that little old preacher?" I called him Little Timmy, but Timothy Flemming is his name.
Have you got good religion? In 1970, and at the age of 19, Timothy Flemming was pastoring his first church. Not much has changed at Forest Chapel. It's still a 2-Sunday-a-month church, and folks still talk about the boy preacher. Deacon Henry Mathis was just a teenager when Timothy Flemming became pastor of Forest Chapel.
Took in a lot of members, and people really enjoyed Reverend Flemming being a young man, as it were.
But before he could take a church, he had to find a wife. Then he met Virginia, the young lady who would eventually become Mrs. Timothy Flemming.
I was on my job then, working at Bill Randall's place. It was a nursing home, which he hired me. Mr. Bill Randall hired me when I was about 17. He took a chance hiring me. I never forget Mr. Bill Randall. He gave me a chance, saw me a young man standing, wanted me a job. But I didn't want to stay around home anymore. I wanted to move out. My brothers and others would not go on church, and I'm saved and they didn't want to be around it. I just wanted to get away where I could be more with God. So I wanted my own place. And that's why I meet Brother Green. I started rooming with him and got a job paying him rent. Well, I went on my job, and Mr. Randall hired me, said, "Look, work night shift until you get 18, because I can't hire you under 18. And he opened that door and took a chance from me. And I worked night shift from 11 until 7 until I was 18. As I would leave early in the morning, I saw this fine black chick coming in. And I asked, "Who is that?" I wouldn't say much to her. And the other guy told me, "That's my woman, man." I said, "Oh, really? That's your girlfriend?" "That's my woman." Everybody was looking at her. And I took that back off. She would come in every morning, whether I would go out, and I'd just speak, "How you do?" Keep going. And finally one day, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, Pastor Flemming, Reverend Flemming." I said, "Yes." "Did you know this young lady really wants you to talk to her?" I said, "Who?" "You know, her name Virginia." "Oh, you mean that fine, good-looking black girl, man, with that light, sweet voice?" I said, "Man, that chick is something else." And I said, "This fella told me," I won't call his name now, "that's his girlfriend." He said, "I don't think so." I said, why you bring it up? She wants to talk to you, but she's scared. I said, she told you this? She came to me. I really want to talk to him. I saw him when he was 13 years old, a boy preacher. So they knew me. And I remember when she came in, she went down. She came up to help her mother, who was a cook. And she would come up to help her mother because they live in walking distance from their convalescent home. And I went down and I spoke to her, and she really froze like that, like she was scared to talk. I said, how you doing? I understand you wanted to meet. And we met. The rest is history. So after we met, I experienced something with her I didn't have with the other girl. She called me one morning when we were dating, said, where are you going to preach? I said, you going to church with me? She was Seventh-day Adventist. The other girl was Pentecostal. Neither one was going to Baptist church. I didn't know she could sing. So I was shocked. I said, well, yes, I'll come pick you up. And I went and preached that night, and guess what? I knew she had me. I couldn't believe she shouted. She was one of the first person to fall out with the rest of them. I said, wow, I got her. When the sermon got her. But anyway, it was fun to think about. I never had a girlfriend go with me, and they gonna shout after I preach. And we started dating. And within a few months, a church was interested in me. At 19 years old, I asked her to marry me. Surprisingly, she agreed. She said, I will. The church didn't call me, but I was really going to ask her to marry me because I really was so lonely. But in those days, if you didn't have a wife, you couldn't pastor. So Pinehurst was a place that had heard me preach when I was a boy. And then they heard I was married. There were several churches going after me when I got married, believe it or not.
When one of Macon's largest churches began to take notice of Reverend Flemming, Reverend Jackson was there to guide him.
If it had not been for a person like Reverend Jackson, at that time, I don't know, I might have had a nervous breakdown. But he coasted me along. God is with you.
And from there, Atlanta. He pastored in Atlanta, but he vowed he would never move to the capital city.
Becoming a pastor at 19 years old was a challenge. I was called, I said earlier, to Forest Chapel Baptist Church in Pinehurst, Georgia, a little small town. I heard they have built another church now through the years. Then I got called to Zion Hill Baptist Church in Macon, where they have grown to a marvelous building there, pastored by Dr. Walter L. Glover, who was a friend of mine growing up. And with that church in Mount Gilgal Baptist Church, and that's more like Dry Branch, Georgia. So I had 3 churches, and I became a revivalist. I quit working. I was running revival every week. That would supplement my income with my wife and my new baby. And through the years, preaching at Forest Chapel, a lady came down there for homecoming. She was the wife of a preacher, Reverend J.I. McCrary. Well, this woman heard me then. She came back to Atlanta and told her husband, you know, people come home on homecoming's day. If they were up north, they knew to come home on homecoming's day. And that was the 3rd Sunday in August, homecoming. We always had a packed house. People came that grew up in the rural from the north, came back to see old friends, homecoming. She heard me at homecoming. Came back and told her husband about it. I didn't know him, and he didn't know me. And he invited me one Sunday morning. And I'm sure he was afraid, but because he said, I just want you to preach at 7:45 service. He didn't tell me to stay. I said, okay, I'm coming. I was going to preach that morning. I rushed back, to my churches in Macon before 11 o'clock. Whatever happened that morning when I preached at the church, Liberty Hill Baptist Church, it was on Memorial Drive then. He came back to me and said, the member said, please, they want you to stay and preach the 11 o'clock service. I said, I got to go. He said, but they don't want you to go. Then I called a deacon and told him in Macon, I won't be there that Sunday to get a guest minister. I preached at 11 o'clock. He came back and said, we want you to stay. I said, stay? Yes. They want you to preach 3 more nights. I preached Monday and I preached Tuesday. I noticed Tuesday, the church was filling up. That's here in Atlanta. And I preached Wednesday, the church was full. Well, I didn't know the people. He came back, can you believe it? And said they had them begging me, please stay 2 more nights to Friday. I said, man, I got to go back. I want a little old baby. He said, just please, just please. The crowd just got out there. Who are you? He never heard me in Atlanta. I preached Thursday and Friday. Church was running over, and I left and went back to Macon. When I came back to Macon, back to my churches, Zion Hill and Mount Gilgal and Liberty Baptist Church, I've been called now church in Macon. I got this call from Reverend McCrary and said, look, the church heard you that night in Decatur. They want you to come preach for them. I said, what church? It says Faith Tabernacle Baptist Church. It's in Decatur. I said, they heard you in revival. They told me to get your phone number. I gave them your number. The deacon's going to call you. Call me. I said, okay, I'll come preach. I came and preached at Faith Tabernacle. Never seen them before. I don't think they ever seen me, but they were probably there one night in revival. When I got through preaching now, knowing I got to go back to Macon, the deacon, this is the strangest thing I ever seen. The deacons came to me, never seen them, and said, will you go downstairs in the basement? I said, for what? We just want you to go down there before you leave. The church wants a meeting right quick, and we want to come back and see you. Just sit down there. It won't take but about 15, 20 minutes. Well, I had to go down there and sit because they hadn't given me no honorarium. So I was sitting with them. Sure, what they got to do, meet and talk about what they going to pay me. And less than 30 minutes, 3 deacons came down in the basement and said, congratulations. I said, what? The church just demanded a meeting and they have voted and called you to pastor. I said, pastor? You all don't know me. I don't even know you all. He said, well, they just demanded a meeting where you accept. I said, well, I'll think about it. I got in my car, came back to my church, Zion Hill, and though I had preached somewhere that morning, I didn't go back over there. And one of my associates preached for me. And then I went to talking over my wife. I said, these people have called me. And I don't want to leave Zion here. I love Mount Carmel Baptist Church. God knows I do. But I never loved the church like I love Zion here. It was a smaller church, but it was so much love. I had promised to build them a church, and it was packed. There was no room in that church. They loved me so much. They told me I could go on up there and preach, but come back, we'll change the service to 2:30. I was scared to come to Atlanta. I didn't want to come to Atlanta. I heard that Atlanta was some evil folk. Those dangerous folk. That's like New York, too. They scared a little southern boy. I don't want to grow up there around all those crooked people. So they scared me in Macon with that. They said, you too young to go up in a big town like that. They frightened me. I wouldn't come. I told him I'd come preach on Sunday morning, but I got to come back to Macon. I'm not moving to Atlanta.
Less than a year after pastoring Faith Tabernacle, Reverend Flemming caught the interest of an even larger church in the Summerhill area. Reverend O.C. Woods, the pastor and founder of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church, had just died, and the congregation was split on who would succeed their beloved pastor.
One Sunday morning, I got to remember, I wasn't at Faith even a year, less than 9 months. I got a call. I saw some people sitting in the audience one Sunday morning. About 10 or 12 strange people. I preached that morning, and I asked my deacon afterward, I said, who are those people? They said, those people from Mount Carmel. I said, Mount Carmel, where's that? Over there, a place called Summerhill. I said, well, what are they doing here? They coming over here to steal our pastor. I laughed. I said, steal me? Our church is a big church and it's vacant. They knew Mount Carmel. I didn't. I laughed it off and I went on home. I got a call about a week later. The chairman of the deacon board of Mount Carmel called me and said, hello, sir. We were at your church that Sunday. I said, you all were Mount Carmel. Yeah, we are pulpit committee. We heard about you, and we came to see you. I said, so? They said, you don't know us? I said, no, I never heard of Mount Carmel. I don't know anything about churches in Atlanta. Nor did I know Reverend O.C. Woods. I never seen him, never heard him. They said, we just want the church to hear you. The church is split. We got an older crowd, wants an old man, and the younger crowd want a younger man. We don't know what to do, but we got to settle on a pastor. And what we heard today, we just can't wait to let them hear you. I said, really? He said, I'm not promising you nothing. Before we call the pastors, got 3 preachers in the run. We just want you to come one Sunday. I said, okay. I came that Sunday morning. I got lost trying to find Hill Street. The chairman deacons said, I'll meet you. I came down. Now my 3 churches had bought me a new car. It was a Brohan Ford. That was a nice car then. So I drove up in the parking lot, wasn't many people there, and he led me there, and I went in the church, wasn't many people there, and I sat in the back. They said, sit here until service start. And all of a sudden, sitting back there in that room, that door swung open by mistake. And I looked, God, look at the people in here. It was like, whew, a crowd of folk. I had not preached in a church that big before, with that many people. And boy, I sat back, and they came and got me and said, I only weighed about 120 pounds, maybe. 125 pounds is why they called me the little man with the big voice. His big voice was so little. I went up, and of course, there's a documentation of it. It's a tape out there called Power from On High. As in there what I said when I got up to preach that morning. And when I got through preaching in there that morning, the sermon was Power from On High. They went wild. They just went wild. In fact, they were screaming and falling out so in there. One of the preachers came and tapped me and said, just sit down a minute. And I sat down. And then I got back up to open the doors of the church. The church just went crazy. And when I dismissed, they wouldn't let me leave. My church is waiting on me in Zion Hill in Macon. They caused me to be late. They was pulling on me. God just sent us a preacher. The women were just hugging me and screaming, and I had to get away from them. Ran out, got in my car, and I was alone. I ain't driving nobody. I was by myself, and I went back and preached my church in Macon and went home. Then about a month, maybe 3 weeks later, I get this call from the chairman. Pastor Flemming, you have been called to pastor Mount Carmel Baptist Church. I said, that big church. They said, the church voted unanimously. 300 voted for you, and something like 30 voted for the other preacher, and another preacher got 4 votes. That's how many preachers were trying to get in Mount Carmel. These were pastors already in Atlanta. The church wants you. Well, I'm gonna tell you, I played big. I said, oh, I'll think about it. And when I hung up the phone, I said, whoa! God almighty, I got excited. And I told my wife, I said, we finna go. She said, go where? To Atlanta. She said, well, are you finna go? I said, no, you go pack. Go pack.
After becoming the pastor of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church in 1975, the 24-year-old Reverend Flemming became known as the little man with the big voice. His fame began to spread even more after he preached his first notable sermon, How Do You Spell Relief?, at the Atlanta Civic Center with over 5,000 in attendance.
Young folk got a way of spelling relief, and the way they spell that relief is cocaine. Another way some people spare relief. You know how some people spare relief when they get trouble? W, I know I'm coming home now. W-H-I-S-D-Y. And this is some real whiskey here. I want to leave a little bit of it in here to let you know that this stuff is dangerous. You know, when folk get trouble now, the first thing they want is a whiskey bottle. But whiskey won't solve your problem. This stuff has destroyed a many homes. This stuff has made a many good men turn into bad men. This stuff has trained a lot of good young men and women into dope addicts. This stuff right here. You know, church folk, whiskey, sinners call it whiskey, and church folk call it medicine. Give me a little medicine for stomach's sake. And did you not know some church folk got excuse for it? One man one time was drinking and he was walking in the church all full of liquor, staggering all over the pulpit, and somebody stopped and said, you know you ought to be ashamed of yourself. He said, ashamed of what? One of the sisters said, in the church all drunk, drinking liquor. He said, it's in the Bible. She said, where is that in the Bible? He said, don't you remember when Jesus was talking to his disciples? He said, drink ye all of it.
After his notable sermon, the ministry became one of the fastest growing churches in Atlanta, outgrowing its facilities of 768 Martin Street, better known as Summer Hill. In 1989, the congregation was forced to move and build new facilities at 2755 Campbellton Road, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia, which was one of the largest African American sanctuaries in the metropolitan area. After these accomplishments, Reverend Flemming gained notoriety on a national level. He was appointed the Director of Media for the National Baptist Convention by its president, Dr. Henry J. Lyon. This opportunity opened the door for him to preach his most notable sermon, Snakes in the Church, at the National Baptist Convention in front of over 50,000 people in attendance.
And the Bible said, and the Lord sent snakes, fiery serpents, in the camp. And I just want to share this with you because I want you to know not all snakes are out there in the grass. They're in the house. Snakes are all in your church, crawling all up under the pews, all around the usher board, crawling all in the choir, yes, in the pulpit. And I don't know, you just might be sitting beside one. Don't you think all snakes are in the grass? I want you to know snakes got in the camp.
Soon after, President Clinton invited Reverend Flemming, along with Reverend Joseph Lowry and Reverend Joseph Robert, to the White House to be a part of the advisory committee for the president's health plan. He later was appointed to represent the National Baptist Convention and its 8 million Baptists around the world at the National Council of Churches. The opportunity allowed his influence to gain an international audience. He was the first African American clergyman to preach in Calcutta, India.
Push it her way through the crowd. When you want a miracle, you have to push your way through the crowd, through doubt, through unbelief. Push it back. There is a struggle before God heals you. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. In South America,
everybody everywhere standing. Come on, everybody, get up on your feet. Come on and give you.
You see, what depresses so many of us, we hang around depressed people. And when you hang around depressed people, it's contagious. If they're sad, they'll make you sad. If you want to be full of joy, get in a church full of joy. If you want some joy, hang around some folk full of joy. If you want some joy, get around some folk got some power.
Reverend Flemming was also honored to have an institution commissioned in honor of his name, Timothy Flemming Institute, located in Liberia, Africa.
They enjoy this school, Lord Jesus. We want for people to be, because talking all around said our school is low, our school not doing nothing, Lord Jesus. We want you to make our school develop. If we don't have nothing, we'll give you the thing. In Jesus' name I pray. Hallelujah. We are the Reverend Flemming School. We our nation to thee. We are the Reverend Fleming School. Oh, we are. We are the Reverend Fleming School. Oh, we are. We are the Reverend Fleming School. With forever, the future leader. Our hearts and minds will be a great nation. Our hearts and minds from our nation to thee. We are the Reverend Fleming School. Oh, we are. We are the Reverend Fleming School. Oh, we are. We are the Reverend Fleming School. Those days of the one star country. Roll our speed, so I can build a nation with God and God, our right. We are the Reverend Fleming School.
I didn't know I could sing. Now, I knew how to sing old camp meeting songs on the floor, but I didn't know I had a singing voice until I became the pastor of Mount Carmel and I got on the radio. And I just started singing a song before I preached. I won't forget Beams of Heaven. It was a 45 and it was a smash. In that day, it was a hit. I didn't know what that was. And basically, people caught on to my singing voice. And they started calling me when I come to preach in Mount Carmel, sing a song, please, before you preach. I didn't know I had a voice to sing. My high school teacher discovered it and told me about it. She said, you got a great singing voice. You got several different voices. I said, really? She said, you got a wide range. I didn't know what that was. So the singing opened doors for me that I started singing, and whoever thought as a singer I would end up singing in the great halls of London, England, Switzerland, Germany, and France, and those countries, got into my singing talent. I could sing the spirituals and some classical music. I could sing jazz, blues, and gospel. I got away with singing a couple of them over there. I had no idea they would offer me all this money in a contract to go give up my church. And from there on, I had no idea my singing talent would take off to be famous for that. And then I got in the old camp meeting and I reached back and grabbed something I had forgotten when I was down in the country singing these songs. I had no idea old camp meeting would take off like it has, and wow, then I end up on CNN after 9/11. CNN took one of my clips, This Is a Mean Old World to Live In, and played it for 31 days on CNN all over the world. And I was shocked. And then later they came back and said, take our phone number off, because we're getting calls from Japan, Russia, everywhere. Well, who's singing? They couldn't tell who I was. And it was a mean old world. After 9/11, they said that healed the nation. And they came back and said, we want another one on CNN. And that was about homeless. They said, give us another one, but don't put our phone number. We shut down the phones. And so I did another song called I Can't Hardly Get Along. And that blew up for 31 days.
All right, just ahead, snow, sleet, and ice, they're all a part of winter life in many parts of the U.S.
So what's the best way to deal with getting rid of them? Well, that's an issue highway officials and environmentalists can't seem to agree on. We'll take a look at the issue and explain after the break. Some of you will check local news after this.
This is a me world to live in. You got to stay here until you die. This is a me old world to live in. You got to stay here until you die. This is a me old world to live in. You got to stay here until you die. Without a mother, without a father, without a sister, without a brother, Oh, then here's of me. You got to stay here until you die.
CNN Newsnight tonight. Follow the whip. CNN correspondents bring you a quick look at the day's top stories.
I can't hardly get along in this world. I can't hardly get along in this world. Can't hardly get along in this world. Just can't hardly get along. You got to moan to get along in this world. You got to moan sometime to get along in this world. Got to moan, children, to get along in this world. You just can't hardly get along. We got to love to get along in this world. We got to love to get along in this world. We got to love everybody to get along in this world. I just can't hardly get along.
I never believed in a preacher singing too much, and I was always afraid of singing, that I would become more known as a singer than a preacher. And I backed away from contracts to sing on labels, record labels. They wanted to do. I did one high-class musician with my choir, and it was a smash in Summerhill. They came back at Atlanta International Records. We want another song from you. I refused. They said, but you're singing. I said, if you don't put out a sermons on me, I'm not singing no more. They said, but they love your singing. They like your preaching too. But I said, if you can't take my sermons, I'm not going to do another song. I don't want to be known as a singer. I'm a preacher. Well, they kind of talked me, and I said, I tell you what, if you take one sermon of mine, I might do another song. They didn't want to do it. I preached a sermon on what jealousy would do. Mr. Freeman said, I don't think it's going to do nothing. He's a better singer than a preacher. I got offended. I said, I'm not singing no song unless you want to let me preach a sermon. When he took the sermon, didn't think it would do nothing, it blew up. And I was preaching in the Bahamas, and I get this call, you just won an award for spoken word. From the GMAW around the world have voted you Preacher of the Year. And I said, for what? The sermon, What Jealousy Would Do. Simple, plain sermon. It shocked the record label. There was never a preacher to win an award for preaching for spoken word. And then I put out another one, Sleeping in the Wrong Woman's Lap. That was my next big hit on Atlanta International Records. At that time, I pulled away from the record label because I didn't want them making me a singer. And I've started God's Strength Records of my own and started putting out more of my sermons, but then my old camp meetings blew up along with my sermons, so that's explains something about my preaching and my singing, and becoming the pastor of Mount Carmel Baptist Church has opened tremendous doors for me, and we outgrew the facilities where we were, and we built the church on Camelton Road, which is 3 times the size of the church in Summerhill. And it's been a wonderful experience ever since.
The years have brought changes and opportunities for Pastor Flemming and Mount Carmel. Pastor Flemming also went back to school, earning a Bachelor's of Arts degree in philosophy and religion, as well as his master's and an honorary doctorate. But perhaps the most challenging experience involved the death of his son due to a drunk driver.
Well, my son's death, Auric Bernard Flemming, was, shall I say, the most devastating thing that ever happened to me in my life. Well, I was very young when I married. I was only 19 years old and became a pastor of a church when I was 19. And then this beautiful little young fella came in my life. He was my joy. We grew up together. When you have a son at 19 and you grow, you are both growing. He was not really fully grown. So he grew up with me, like more than just my son, but like my best friend. We grew together. And then, of course, my other two sons came along, but they're 4 years apart. But you can imagine he was the part of me when I wasn't where I am today and when I was just getting started. And he was in that car with me when I was going, preaching in the little churches, who knew what was going on more and saw me as a young father coming up struggling. And he became my best friend. And of course, the tragedy of losing him and a drunk driver right around the corner from my house was so devastating. I can't find words to express my pain. I had gone out, well, let me say it like this. When he started preaching, I didn't know he was thinking about preaching. He wanted to play basketball, but he wasn't tall enough for that, and I didn't try to discourage him. In fact, I went and built a basketball goal in the back of my yard for him. I tried to work with whatever he wanted to do, and I knew something was in him anointed, and he was running from it. And finally, I didn't know, he was driving along this road one day going home, and he said, I was preaching a sermon which I've pretty much known for sightseeing in heaven. I've preached it many times. And I didn't know he had that tape. He had a little cassette in his car that I bought him. And he was driving along, and he states, I was preaching sightseeing in heaven, and he drove and pulled on the side of the road and he stopped and was just crying and crying. And he said, in one of his sermons, he said, I had to give in, Dad. I didn't know that. I did not know that. And he said, he pulled over, my own dad was preaching. He said, I just yelled and screamed, Lord, I give in. Then he came to me and said, Dad, I want to preach the gospel. Wow. What a shock. He always had music in him, and Auric could sing. And he had started a little group, a little quartet group. He could play the drum, blow the saxophone, and things of that nature. Well, when he started preaching, in less than 6 months, he became so powerful. It was unbelievable. The church just had a fit over him. And whenever we announced that Art was going to preach, it was standing room only. So I just gave him the 7:45 service, just let him preach that every morning. And sometimes I would let him preach at 10:45 or 11 o'clock service then. I still had standing room only. There's some funny things about him. When he became such a powerful preacher and the city was going wild over him, like people like Dr. Jamal Bryant and E. Dewey Smith, all of them grew up together, were talking about how they, when they were young, Jamal Bryant didn't know you just come up here and sit up there in the balcony to hear Auric. And many other great young preachers would come up there to hear Auric because they all came up along there together. And he would always wait until I would leave the house and come to church. And it was funny, he would act like he's in my room praying, in the bedroom in my study. It was a study I had in a room. And he'd go in there and pray. When I go and look at him, he was he was really fake praying. He was waiting on me to leave. so he could go get him one of my nice suits. It was funny if I think about it. And I would think he was just praying, just praying. So I would leave, go on over to the church because he's going to preach, and I have to go there and preside. And when I get ready to introduce him, he'll come walking up there, church packed with my suit on, my best suit. He was about the same size. And I'll get so mad, I was talking to my lips, "Oh, what you talking about, old Negro?" And he would never look at me. He had his head down. The church did not know. When I was so mad, he got on my suit. He knew how to do it. And as soon as he preached and tear the house up, he always ran out fast. I could never catch him. Where did he go? That rascal ran home and got out of my suit, and it's all wet up. And by the time I got home, he was gone. That was so funny. He didn't want to let me catch him home, girl. I was going home to get him, but that was the joy of my son. And to lose him, God, I just didn't know what God was doing. I was just getting home from out of town. But God fixed it so I could speak to him because I was on my way back from New Orleans. We had been on a crusade, and he called me. But I was going on to Louisiana, Shreveport, to start my own crusade. I was at Benny Hinn Crusade, just going there for spiritual uplift before I would go to Shreveport. And all of a sudden, I went to the service that morning, an usher, Caucasian brother, he laid hands on me. And one of my armor bearers was with me. He said, "Brother, are you a preacher from Atlanta?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Look, God's telling me to pray over you." I said, "Really?" "Yes." He touched me and I was falling. And he said, "Hold him, sir, because he's going to need this. Whatever he's about to experience, he's going to need this anointing." And then he walked off. I never seen this usher before. And I asked my deacon with me, I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I don't know." We went back to the hotel room and they put me out the hotel. And I did not know. They locked the doors. I asked my deacon with me, I wonder why they're doing it. They told us, "We want you out the room." This is in New Orleans at the crusade. I said, "Well, look, I'll pay for the room. I just need one more day before I go to Shreveport." They said, "No, we got a big convention coming in, and we're sorry, Mr. Flemming. We want you out the room." I said, "Well, can I get my things?" They said, "Well, we allow you in to get your things, but you cannot stay in that room." They put us out. And I was so mad that they put me out of the hotel. I didn't know what was going on. And I said, "Well, look here, Deacon, I was driving my car then. I said, let's drive on to Shreveport. I don't know what's going on here in New Orleans." And as we were getting ready to go to Shreveport, I had a committee waiting on me to come prepare for my crusade, first crusade. Something said, "Go home." I said, "Hey, Deke, turn around." He said, "What you want me to do, Pa?" I said, "I don't know. I don't want to go out there. I'm just going home. I'm frustrated about how they treated me at this hotel. It just killed my spirit." I said, "Drive, man, just go. I'll call the committee and tell them I'll fly back and plan my crusade later." Because I wanted to do a crusade and give the church to Auburn. That's what I wanted to do, not what God wanted to do. I said, "Lord, he's taking over the church so I could give him this and go and do a world crusade." I was all on BET and preaching everywhere. And on my way back, we got to Alabama. My son called me. Shockingly, I picked up the phone. He said, "Hey, Daddy, are you in Shreveport or Louisiana?" I said, "No, I'm coming home." These folk put me out my room. He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, what are you coming home for?" I said, "I'm coming home because I'm just frustrated and I just come hear you preach. He said, Daddy, we wanted you to rest while you were out there. And we don't want you coming back here. We told you to go take a few days rest and go on plan for your crusade. I got Sunday morning cover. I said, I know that. That's okay. I'm just going to come hear you. I don't know why I want to come back, but I'm coming. He said, okay. That was in Birmingham, Alabama, when he called me. When I got here, we were having a carnival for the youth, and he was in charge of that. That's on a Saturday. He was on his way here, I'm told, and the wreck took place. Now, I didn't know it. When I got here, I happened to see people taking down everything for the carnival. And I told my deacon, who was driving with me, why are they taking stuff down? He said, I don't know. And I passed the church. I said, well, past the church. We got down on the corner, and I said, let's just turn around. He said, Pastor, what you want me to do? Do you want me to go in the parking lot? I said, no, I don't think I want to be. I just go home. Well, I got almost to the church. I said, no. Pull in. Let me just make sure everything all right. I don't know why they taking stuff down. And as soon as I pulled in the driveway, my deacon, chairman of the deacon board, came to me and said, Reverend, I said, the look on his face, go home. I said, what? Go home. He was crying. I said, well, what is happening? We taking stuff down that we were planning the carnival. Just go home. I looked. He said, please go home. I said, why go home? Miss Flemming told us she wants you home. And I can't tell you everything. Just please go home. I saw people crying in the yard. I grabbed him out the car. I said, wait, you're my chairman. Tell me what is going on. He says, all right, Reverend, it's all right. Now, what about my son? He said he had a car accident, and we lost him, Pastor. I said, lost him? Yeah. I fell back in the car screaming. I said, this is a dream. I was screaming and screaming, and the DJ closed the door. Please get him home. I screamed. I don't know nothing. I was just on the seat just screaming and screaming. I could not, and I knew it was upsetting. The deacon, he was crying. And when we got to my house, my wife came to the door, Mrs. Flemming, and had a Reverend Carswell was at the house with her, to comfort her when I got home. And I could barely get out of the car. They had to just help walk me to the car. I was just screaming, I screamed, and I screamed. I really couldn't believe this. And I said, I want to see my baby. They said, well, we'll take you down to Grady. Reverend Carswell assisted me, and wife said, we'll drive you down there. I still thought I was dreaming. When we went down there to Grady, the lady was a little sharp and kind of sharp mouth with me, and she talked kind of a little rough. And I listened, only have but a few minutes, and you cannot stay in here long. I said, oh my God. And when we finally went in there and saw him in that body bag, it hit me, this is real. This is my baby, Ari, my best friend. I just stared at him. I went in a trance, and my wife grabbed me. And the deacon said, please, let's go. I walked out, got in the car. I just went up in my study. It was news everywhere. Atlanta was tore up. And I went up in my study. Now, this is Saturday night. Church is Sunday morning. That night, I screamed so, and the enemy came to me, believe it or not, and said, see, God don't love you. Look what he just did to you. He went after your favorite son. Why don't you just take an overdose? Why don't you just kill yourself? I sat back and I just heard that enemy talking. God, you ought to be mad at God. It's like Job, like he told, curse God and die. I said to myself, well, what will my mammals think of me? You won't be here to worry about it. Just give God a cussing out. I knew that was the devil. And I said, Satan, get out of my house. I rebuke you now. And I rebuke you now. And all of a sudden something left. And I got back on my knees in my study, still crying. And then I asked God, why, please, why would you do this? He's too young, just 22, hadn't been preaching but 2 years. And the Lord spoke to me, clear as a whistle. Now you know how I felt when I lost my son. And he said, my son. Said it again, my son. I went like in a trance. That's my word to you. I toned down. I had to go read the crucifixion of Christ and take a second look at it. It's like the Passion of Christ when I looked at it and saw just how they treated Jesus. Oh, glory, hallelujah. Thank you, Lord. And seeing how they treated him, and God gave his son for me and my sins. I think, listen, people, I felt the heart of God for the first time, how he really feels about man, that he gave his son. And that morning, after God spoke that, I perked up. My sister sent word down here and told my family, don't let him go over to that church this morning, that Sunday morning, until we get down there from Detroit. My other sister coming from Florida, others from Macon, brother, family. We don't want him in that pulpit. He will fall out. We're scared for him. We know how much he loved Ari. And when I heard them trying to tell me, we don't want you to go, I said, no, I'm going to church. I just got a word from heaven. And when I got up, my family started getting dressed. When they saw me getting dressed, my children and my wife started getting dressed. Other than that, nobody was going to leave and go anywhere. And they got in the car with me, and I drove myself and my family over there to the church. Now, I got to remember, my wife was the first one saw the wreck, and she didn't know it was Ari's car. Coming over to the festival, she left the house behind him, and she saw a wreck right on the corner, said somebody had a wreck. And she said, that looked like Ari's car on that bank. Ladders were all in the street. Nobody was out there. It was in the neighborhood. Nobody knew it was a wreck. And Tim Jr. was in the car with my wife. And they went up and looked in the car, and there he was lying there. And then she said a man walked up from out of nowhere. That was a gentleman who had hit him. He was a carpenter because ladders were everywhere. The man was speeding. And I understand she ran, banging on the neighbor's door. Please, somebody help me. This is my son. They called the ambulance. And she said, Art, when they put Art in the limo, that he had his hands on his head. He was alive. And when he got degraded, they thought he was okay. But they didn't jump right on it, and he flooded his lung because the car stern heel hit him and crushed his chest. And it flooded his lung. That's when he died. Now, when I came to church that morning, I didn't stay home and moan because I had heard from God. When my feet hit the third step of the pulpit, power hit me, just like that. And I was able to go up there and stand. And I had one of my sons to preach. Chief of police came to see me the next day, Mr. Bell, about 2 days afterward. And his thing was, Reverend, what would you be able to get out there and say? What would be your text? I said, my text is going to be, now you know how I felt when I lost my son. He screamed in my front room, wow. My God, what you thought? I said, God told me that's what I'm going to preach. Now I know what God went through. Of course, he got up and used some of my stuff before I got up to preach. I was upset about that, but I was going to show him how to do it when I got up. But he got my text and used it because he'd asked me. I didn't like it, but God said, you preach it anyway. And if you look at the funeral, you'll see he used it. But I got up and preached it. And I've been preaching ever since, stronger. Now I know what God went through just to save us. Do you hear me? If you could just look at what God's heart felt like, no wonder the earth had a cosmetic fit. No wonder God had to turn his back on his son so he won't turn his back on us. He had to let Jesus die. And he cried, my God, why have thou forsaken me? God forsaken God. But it shows you how much God loves you. And I was told that was perhaps one of the biggest funerals ever in the city of Atlanta. Over 300 preachers were there from everywhere. President Clinton sent greetings and condolences. There were letters coming from everywhere. You can go on YouTube and look at the entire funeral, and you can see it for yourself. I preached my own son's funeral. The strangest thing about it, after Ari died, we didn't know the girl he was dating was pregnant. Listen. And this young lady was in the church, in the choir. I didn't believe she was pregnant by Ari. Well, young folk, they had been dating. But the strangest thing about it, she started showing 1 month after we buried my son. Then I'm thinking, wait, what in the world? She said, this is Ari's baby. I said, oh no, this can't be real. And she came in, Pastor. Yes, we had intimacy. And she said where it was. She said it was in Macon. Macon, my hometown. She said, yes, he was running revival down there at Evelina Baptist Church, and I went down to hear him preach that night, and we came back together, and quite naturally, when we went to the hotel to get his thing packed to come, we got involved. It wasn't nothing we planned to do. She said, I wasn't planning on getting pregnant. She said, but it happened. I said, wow, in Macon, my hometown? And she said, I'm pregnant. Well, quite naturally, my wife was protesting that like all mothers would do. They know that's a lie, that ain't no Ari's baby, can't be. I'm not accepting it. And shockingly, While she was upset about it, I was upset, but I accepted because I didn't know what was going on. The baby came here on my wife's birthday. And she named him Auburn. Bernard Smith. And if I could show you a picture of Ari when he was a baby, and you look at this picture, the two, they look like twins, around the same age. You know what I learned from that? God took him and gave me some of him back. I was proud. He went on and he went into ministry, finished Morehouse and finished Harvard, and working up there at Harvard. I'm just saying how God works if you trust him in your pain and in your hurt. Just trust him.
Even out of that tragedy came a blessing.
My name is Bernard Smith, and I'm 6 years old, and my pastor is named Pastor Timothy Flemming.
He's your pastor, and he's also what? What is he?
Granddaddy.
I wrote a book. It's called Coping with the Uncopable. Strange title, Coping with the Uncopable. I wrote this book out of pain. How to cope with the death of a loved one is in this book. How to cope with bitterness. How to cope with a bad habit. How to cope with depression. Well, I was depressed. And there's so many things in this little old simple book. I've been told this is a nice paperback, and my son Timothy Jr., he's a publisher, and he republished this and made it much more beautiful. He's a prolific writer, and he went back and edited some of the things. I couldn't put everything in this book that I wanted to say, that I really preached it when I preached these, but the meat of what is in this sermon is in here. And this book has saved some people's lives. I don't talk about it. I've been planning to talk about it, but it hits right. It's very simple. You can do it you can read it in one sitting. And it's simple. Those of you that know me know I preach with simplicity. So you can very well understand. This book been sent to prison and saved some inmates because it's a paperback. They'll let you send that, but not a hard copy. I dare you to read this. Get it. And if you're going through depression, if you're going through pain, when you read the first page of this book, it's going to jump out at you. And you won't put it down. Trust me, if you give it to somebody hurting, going through something, they'll never give it back. And inmates are getting this book, reading it. And I had one man say he's in prison now, and he said he's teaching out the book. Well, when you get it, friends, you'll hear straight from my heart what I went through. And that's the story of my son, Ari Bernard Flemming, great preacher, only 2 years. I heard Dr. Jasper Williams said at his funeral, he said, Flemming, he had too much power for his time. And God just took him on. But now another preacher at the convention told me, he said, Flemming, God took your left hand so you can use your right hand. No, God took your right hand so you can use your left hand. And ever since then, I went back to really preaching hard. Now I know how God felt when he gave me and you his son.
Tell us about one of your main influences, Dr. William Holmes Borders.
Dr. William Holmes Borders, my mentor. I was 13 years old, believe it or not. An older man that had a lot of influence on my life, which was several, of them. But of all the preachers that I can think of, nobody touched me like William Holmes Borders when I heard him when I was 13 years old. Listen, I was used to the old country preachers in the rural, and I had all that, I knew that. But I never heard a preacher like William Holmes Borders. So when he came to Macon, somebody called me and said, listen, son, here this great world-renowned preacher is coming to town. They had his picture in the paper. And this old man called me and said, listen, boy, you know about Martin Luther King? I said, yeah, great Martin Luther King. He said, well, here's a man as great as Martin Luther King. I said, really? His name is William Holmes Borders, and he's from Macon. I said, what? He pastored the Wheat Street. I said, oh, I heard of that church, that famous church in Atlanta. Wheat Street is Atlanta. And it's pastored by William Holmes Borders. And when he came to town, I decided to go down there to hear him. He was preaching at First Baptist Church downtown. Those were more the high-up people in the city of Macon then, First Baptist Church, historic church, most of the educators. And they didn't do much carrying on much. They was a listening crowd. But he came there, and I sat in the back as a little boy. The place was packed. And he wasn't preaching, he was actually giving a speech for the emancipation program that we would have every year. And when he got up there, the command of his audience, the humor, he had everybody rolling and laughing. He was so dramatic, he could act out everything he said in his flow of words, and his humor had you just rolling. I sat with my mouth open. Oh, I just heard one of the world's greatest preachers. He must have stood there an hour and a half, and the crowd was just mesmerized by him. And then he sat down. I wanted to come, I felt like I was in the midst of Martin Luther King. And when I walked up, a little boy, I went up to the pulpit. I was brave to shake his hand, and he just looked at me and smiled and shook my hand. And he said, you a preacher? I said, yes, I am. He said, how old are you? I said, 13. He said, stay in school, young man, and stay with God. I felt like I had shaken the president's hand. And people just swarmed around me to push me out of the way. I went back, I never forgot him. When he was quoting a poem, I'm somebody. Boy, I tell you, he wrote that. I'm somebody. He went on down there, just, I'm somebody. I'm somebody. I'm a singer, Marion Anderson. I'm a poet. He just went on down, and the place just went up in thunder. I'm somebody. And when I came to Atlanta, I didn't know nobody when I'd been called to Mount Carmel. I didn't know no preachers. The first person I knew to go look for was William Holmes Borders. Wheat Street was Atlanta. I drove up, and I walked up, and he looked at me. He would sit on that porch. That was a strange porch. I got a lot of trainers sitting on that porch. And the strangest thing about that porch on that portion, the mosquitoes will eat you up, but none of them would bite him. I never understood. I would see Pop, I call him Pop, his arm would be full of mosquitoes, and he would just rub them off. And I said, they're not biting you, they're just eating me up. He said, no. I guess I said the mosquito knew he was the pastor. So that was some strange days on that porch. I loved that old man. I didn't know nobody but to see him. And I walked up, and when I sat down, he said, young preacher, who knows who you might be one day? You might be the pastor of Wheat Street. I said, sir? He said, you never know. Sit over here, boy, and let's talk. When I told him I was from Macon, he lit up. I told him, he said, "You from Macon?" And, oh, he went through the history of where he was born in Macon, and I pastored a church not far from where his kin people were, out in Swift Creek. And when I told him these things, and he went to talking about where he threw paper, that was somewhere the same route where I threw paper. I said, wow, this is unbelievable. I threw paper on that route when I was a teenager, and he threw paper on that route when he was living in Macon. And it made such a connection with William Home Borders and I. Unbelievable. We connected. I always said, I want to be like this man. Oh, I want to be like that great preacher, that world-renowned preacher who been all in movies and really moved us when during racism and all the time in the 60s, this man portrayed Christ and called a play called Behold a Man before 50,000 people at the Atlanta Stadium, black and white, when we weren't even sitting together. We came together and saw this man on this 40-foot cross being lifted up, Behold a Man, and I think that movie influenced the Passion of the Christ. And he was the man who started such a thing as that. The power of William Home Borders gave me my human, my preaching, and I never dreamed I would someday be preaching for him, which he did get to meet me, to run revivals at the great famous Wheat Street, and then asked me to become co-pastor. Was my greatest moment. And you know, I asked Ralph D. Abernathy, who was a great friend of mine, did I make a mistake turning down Wheat Street? He said, I did. I said, I did? He said, Mount Carmel's a great church, but Wheat Street and Ebenezer churches were known throughout the world. Flemming, you should have taken it. But God didn't lead me that way. But it was a great opportunity to preach. Wheat Street Baptist Church was the most famous church along with Ebenezer at the time. I did my first concert there at Wheat Street when I presented my first recital there. He was there and the church was packed. He was very impressed. He never heard me before. And after he heard me, he was walking around with his head just shaking all while I was singing. This is unbelievable. He was just walking all through the church. This is unbelievable. This young preacher is more gifted than I ever heard.
We have had an exposure to a family, to a preacher, to a singer, to a builder, like of which I've never seen before in my life. And I'm 81 years old. And this thing has been absolutely terrific. Give me a hand on that. I've never seen in my life a person who's so gifted. All kinds of ways, and all perfect in every one of them. Preacher, lecturer, and anything else you say, he's there. It's wonderful. A preacher like that is born once every 400 years. He's not ashamed of slavery. He's not ashamed of his race. And God knows he ain't scared of nobody. And to look at him unfold is really a treat.
I played a great role in the Sweet Auburn Festival. A gentleman at Memorial Wheat Street Baptist Church named Benny Smith was a deacon there. He was about one of the first deacon I met when I first came to Atlanta. I was on Auburn Avenue eating something, and this gentleman was sitting next to me. I didn't know anybody, and he spoke, "How you doing?" I said, "Fine." And he said, "Where you from?" I said, "I'm from Macon, Georgia, and I just been called a church in Decatur." And he said, "I'm a deacon of Wheat Street." I said, "Wow, William Horn Borders? That's the gentleman I always wanted to meet." And he actually helped me introduce me to Pastor Borders. And well, we got to know him through the years. And when I became the pastor of Mount Carmel, my singing talent again, he opened doors for me. He said, "We want you to come down. We want to have a Sweet Auburn festival." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, we're trying to bring blacks together once a year and remember Auburn Avenue of what it used to do in the community and all that it has done and made so many black millionaires when doors were not open for blacks." I said, "Splendid idea." He said, "Well, look, Pastor, we want you to come and join us. Will you be a part of the team?" I said, "Well, look, I'm not good in politics, but I'll handle the spiritual part. But when it comes to the business aspect, I don't want to get involved." He said, "Okay, that's fine. We just want you a part of it." So they will have their activities all week long, jazz and blues, and you know how people have carnivals, festivals like New Orleans, and they would come from everywhere. We drew 100,000 people, or maybe more. So I told him I'll just have the Sundays thing. Let me just come in, set up a stage right in front of Wheat Street Baptist Church, and I'll come and I'll preach, pray, and sing. I'll do it all. I will bring a little short sermon in, I'll sing, and I'll pray for the people. And I would do that every year, and it would draw hundreds of people around. And there you can see me there at the Sweet Auburn Festival. We had a big thing going, and it started growing and growing. And last I know, 200,000 people were showing up. And what happened, I think some people got jealous. It was taken over by the city. And then they drew bigger crowds. It became a moneymaker. And people came from all over the world. I don't know if they still have the Sweet Auburn Festival, but yes, I played a role in that. When it comes down to my love and compassion for people, I guess it just flows out. I love people. I don't like being arrogant, and I don't allow success to go to my head. Whatever God has blessed me to do and travel and preach and go places, I give God the glory because I know where I came from and I know who did it. That put me around the world, been around the world 5 times in the Holy Land. I've baptized people in the Holy Land and preached in other countries and became the pastor of this church to do what we did, but it didn't happen overnight. It was a struggle, but staying humble at the feet of Christ. And maybe Reverend Borders still have an influence on me, my pastor, Dr. Borders. He was like that. I'm watching him at Wheat Street, which was one of the greatest churches in the world. He was similar like that. He was just, Reverend Borders would come to your house as big as he was and get out on the floor and play with babies. I like that. I was impressed with that. Maybe that touched me about him, but I was naturally like that. That I like humor, I like seeing people laugh, and it makes me feel good because I made them feel good. And I like touching people, I like being around people, and it's just my heart like that. I'm sort of a pastor who will just help people. If I got it, I give it. And I'm not so big, I won't even pick up a mop and sweep the floors around here. Members have caught me doing it and get on me about it, but if I tell you to do something, you won't do it, I do it myself. But I love God that way. I always say to preachers, it's all right, be a lion in the pulpit and a lamb on the floor. Be a lamb on the floor and a lion in the pulpit. Be fearless in the pulpit, but humble down around God's people because they belong to God, not you. And my spirit of compassion for people, the poor, is still there. And there are other things I try to do for the community. Even here on Camelton Road, I'm the founder of the Greenbrier Merchant Association, trying to pull the businesses together here on Camelton Road. Let me tell you something why I do what I do in this community. I do not like politics. I must confess we have to have them, but I don't have the anointing for it. I'm a preacher, pastor, and a leader. So something happened here when we first built the church, when we moved in the neighborhood. I wasn't paying any attention to this neighborhood. I was doing like most preachers. That's the government job. That's the mayor's job. That's the politician's job to see about the community. And somebody made a comment, and it got to me. He rides up and down Camelton Road in this nice car the church bought him, and he pay us no mind. And he's the voice of this community. He has the biggest crowd on Camelton Road. When I heard that, I went home in tears. That's what they think about preachers. All they want is money. But sometimes it's not that, it's where we're limited to go. And I decided to take the knock. I said, I'm gonna get involved. I started calling town hall meetings, well, all kind of meetings. I was trying to bring blacks together after things started going down on Camelton Road. We moved over here because Camelton Road was thriving, and it made a turn. And really one while we were talking about selling the church to move, and the neighborhood came out after me. Why would you turn your back on us now when we need you? The bank had given me the money to buy property and move. I turned it down and said, no, we'll suffer with them. Let me be a voice in the community. I'll take the knocks. We decided, my board looked, but Reverend, look, the bank gave you money. I said, we'll do some repairs, we'll open back up our Summer Hill location, I'll buy some more property, we're gonna stay here. That's what we did. And I'm fighting today for the community. And I started a campaign of paying people to pick up the trash on Camelton Road 25 years ago. When the city couldn't do it all, I would beg them to come with community change, and a lot of Section 8 people came in the area, had not been trained to know how to keep the community clean. It was just too much for the city. I got some homeless people together. I said, let me give them $50 a piece, about 5 or 8 of them at one time. And I want you all to pick up trash from Greenbrier Mall all the way up to Marta. Those persons through the years that somebody gave me an old pickup truck. It was all beat up, but I took it and fixed it up. They saw me doing this, and the gentleman gave me that truck. And I was pay these guys to pick up trash from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock up and down the street to keep Camelton Road clean. We would pay them. I asked some other churches to help me so I could give them more. They wouldn't do it, so that's the city's job. Well, I said, your community have to work with the city. What can we give back to the people? Well, nobody wouldn't help, so I said I'd do it myself. And they gave me an award here. Well, they put me in the paper here, called me the Good Samaritan of Camelton Road. There's a picture of the Good Samaritan of Camelton Road. Some paper put that in, put me in the paper there. And I do it out of love for the community. And I host town hall meetings. Well, I don't call them town hall meetings, community restoration meetings. As you very well know, we just had one here at our church about the MARTA transit system. I pulled together that along with the City Council, Ms. Overstreet, and the Mayor of Atlanta, Mr. Dickens. And the largest gathering, I was told, ever in the history of Atlanta was just held here at our church. about MARTA and the light rail system. I did not know the city had never hosted a town hall meeting that large. It was at least 800 people here. The whole entire city was here. The whole council was here. City council was here. The mayor came. Mayor Campbell came. Many celebrities came. Fulton County came. We had never seen that many people come together in a town hall meeting in the history of Atlanta. That's what they say.
Good afternoon, friend. I'm Reverend Timothy Flemming, Senior Pastor of the Mount Carmel Baptist Church, and we welcome all of you here today. We welcome you all here today. This is a great cause. This is a call for humanity. This is an hour when we, as churches and concerned people in Atlanta, are coming together to show love to the people in Flint, Michigan. This is a time to practice what we talk about. Love is not a word you just speak. Love is a word that shows action. We are here today to show our love for a city that's in need. You can give without loving, but you can't love without giving. The cause of crime in Flint, Michigan, that's why we're here. Because children's lives are at stake in Flint, Michigan, that could probably affect them for the rest of their life for drinking and inhaling dangerous air and water. That's why we're here. We're here today because the city of Flint, Michigan, in some areas look like a ghost town, because most of the people in the area have moved because of their business have had to close down. People have left the neighborhood. We're here today because it seems that there's a voice crying in the wilderness, but now the wilderness is also crying for a voice. We're here today to show our love because it's not about skin color. It's not about whether you're black or white, red or yellow. All we know that all blood is red. And we're here today because we care. We say Atlanta, Georgia is a city too busy to hate, but it's also a city too busy not to care. And because we care, we show our love, because when one hurt, we all should hurt. We should not forget what happened in Katrina. When disaster hit Katrina, we waited to the last minute to respond to the lives of innocent people. And as a result, people were buried in water, so to speak, and many of them got no attention. We learned from the mistakes that were made in Katrina that we take actions immediately. Now, we are here today to show Flint, Michigan, and the entire nation that we must not wait any longer to take action.
Well, I'm Pastor Flemming in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're very happy to be right here in Flint, Michigan. As you can very well see, Atlanta has really demonstrated love here. We have been sending trucks. There are about 5 more trucks on the way here. We're held up because of traffic. 2 of the trucks are already in the parking lot. We have taken up over 400,000 gallons of water in Atlanta, Georgia, to show our love for you who are in Flint, Michigan. We've heard your cry. We know that things have been sad for you, but we're here to give you some hope. Keep your hope alive. Don't give up. Somebody does care. And what we're saying to you here in the city of Flint, we're just trying to show a little love. We're not into the bureaucracy of things. We're not into your business. We're not getting up here to find out what's going wrong. That's not our mission. Our mission from Atlanta is to show you love and to show you here in Flint, Michigan, that when you hurt, we hurt. We're worried about the people that can't get this water. We're concerned about the person that are handicapped, that have no transportation, blind and crippled, the old and the sick, the people that can't get no water at all. We're here to make sure that you can get this water and get this water free. There's no charge for this water. Look around you. See the water that's already here. The churches are involved. It's about the church speaking out. It's time that we learn from mistakes. We cannot permit what happened in Katrina to happen here. We sat around and we waited until people died in Katrina before we acted. Today, we want to act early. Katrina should have been a lesson to us. We learn from mistakes. We're here today because we know that this can happen again. Not only here in Flint, but this could happen to Atlanta. It could happen in Chicago. It can happen in Detroit. It can happen anywhere. And we're here to let our voices be heard here in Flint. We heard your voice crying in the wilderness, but we also know the wilderness is crying for a voice. From Atlanta, Georgia, we're showing love is a word of action. Love is not a word you speak. Love is a word you demonstrate. And you can give without loving, but you can't love without giving. And we're here to show, we're here to give and respect our city and respect you as citizens. One of the greatest things that you should learn from this incident, that you have a lot of power in your finger. And that means you have the power to vote. And a lot of people finding out, who are you? What do you have? What can you do to help situations like this? Oh, my friend, it's right on your finger. Vote. Make sure that you support the people that you want in office. We're not here to get involved with that, but we want to bring you together to stand together, because together we stand, divided we fall.
Flemming says it's important this doesn't get overlooked in the momentum for what matters in this country. You know, maybe we should have a campaign that water matters too.
Hey, I think they ought to write a song on that. Maybe one of the rap artists should do that.
It's something these Atlanta pastors are committed to. If you would like to help Atlanta reach its goal of delivering 10,000 cases of water to Flint, Michigan, it's not too late to get involved. You can still drop off a case of water. Just do it at Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Atlanta. I'm Gloria Neal, CBS 46 News.
When it comes down to preaching, I could talk all day on that, because I am a preacher and I know preaching. But the only way you can really be a successful preacher, you have to know people. And you have to know the people you're preaching to. I remember my school days. I was going to school, high school in the day, going to American Baptist Theological Seminary Extension Center at First Baptist Church at night. So when I finished high school, I had 2 diplomas, one from there and from high school at Ballard-Hudson High School. And of course, I went on back to Morehouse College, and I was pastoring a big church trying to go to school, and it was horrible with a wife, 3 babies, trying to build a church and had a big church was a tremendous task. I ended up in the hospital like I had a light heart attack when I was only 36, and it was too much. So I couldn't get the education that I really wanted to get and matriculated that as far as I wanted to go when I had the time, because I started pastoring at 19. I did a lot of reading on my own, and a couple of places gave me honorary doctorate degree, and some places when I went back and things, I appreciate that. But you need to understand what preaching really is. And one thing that has helped me when it comes to preaching, I studied the people I was preaching to. I can preach before anyone. I can preach before intelligentsia. I can preach to a crowd where you don't have to say nothing. Just listen. I like teaching and talking to people and teaching people. And I like preaching. I like spontaneous worship. But I can do it any way you want it. I think my success becoming a preacher, I studied Jesus himself, the greatest preacher of all. And if you study him and his teaching style, preaching style, or however way you want, they call me preaching is a spoken communication word of divine truth and proper proclamation of the gospel. I always say, I give it to you like this. You got to look at the word preach. You got to take the P off of preach and reach. And you're going to have to take the R off of reach and reach each. The gospel is a God spell that you put on people. It has to first capture you before you can give it to the people. Someone has said they used to catch on fire in their study and go to church and let the people watch them burn. It's like a shotgun. I wanted to shoot a shotgun one day at a snake when I was fishing. The old man gave me the shotgun and said, there the snake is. I never shot a shotgun before. When I pulled that trigger, the shotgun knocked the snake out and knocked me out. That's what preaching is. It'll knock the people out and it'll knock you out. What do you do? And what are your aim when you preach? The best advice I can give you, as I said, study Jesus. Preaching is not preaching above the people. It's preaching to the people. Now, if you got a lot of giraffes in your church, then go ahead and preach to the people up high in the tree. But all people are not giraffes. There are some people running around like little rabbits and ants. And it's all right to take it high, brother, but break it down. As the old lady said, break it down. I tell this joke. One time a young preacher walked out. He had his projectivity, his territorial space, eye contact with his audience, and he went to preaching. An old lady said, boy, you can't preach. He looked at her and said, oh, you ignoramus, what do you know about preaching? She said, I don't know what preaching is, but I know what it ain't. She said, you can't preach. If you're not reaching, you're missing the whole aim of preaching. Jesus told parables that people could identify with. He talked the language of the people that understood the language. It depends upon who you're preaching to. Now, if you're preaching to impress the people where you've been to school, I want to tell you something, preacher. There are people in your congregation been to school, and you're not impressing them with enticing words. They come to hear a word. You don't know what they're going through at home that degrees won't reach. When you're hurting and you got family problems and other issues going on in your life, they don't care nothing about your style. They want a word. A lot of people don't realize that you got to have a word for people that they can live on, that they can take home with them. However style you have. Blessed is he that is flexible, for he shall not be broken. You got to learn how to bend where you have to bend and know your people. The worst thing when I came to pastor Mount Carmel Baptist Church, I knew the people. I knew what kind of preaching they were used to. I didn't come in there with a lot of enticing words. I followed a common pastor who didn't have much education, but he was a great pastor. And he called that crowd with a little education, a great, great man of God. There was no need of me coming in there trying to put down what Reverend Woods had done. He called that crowd. I came in and piggyback on what he had been doing, preaching. And that preaching opened doors for me to get them there. Now, some people say, I don't like the way some people preach. I don't like the style they preach. I had one preacher say at the convention, the only reason he has a big crowd, he's telling them what they want to hear. Well, I got a word for you. If you don't preach and tell them what they want to hear, you won't get them there to preach to them and tell them what they need to hear. Sometimes you got to do things to get them there to give them what they need. So one of the things that's important when it comes down to preaching, knowing the people you are preaching to, study them, prepare your sermon. I have a little bit of everything. I have humor in my preaching. I think that came from William Home Borders. He had a lot of humor. And I started having a lot of humor because of the kind of people I'm preaching to. Black people are hurting. They're in pain. Laughing is medicine. I guarantee you, I can walk into a church, I don't care whether it's white or black, I've preached to them all. I'd have them rolling when they don't even laugh. Because I'm preparing them for what I'm about to give them what they need. Because humor is medicine. Study some of the greatest preachers of the world, like Gardner Taylor, for example, and William Home Borders, and all. They're all J.H. Jackson. They get up and tell something funny first and break the crowd loose, and then they go at the message. Preaching techniques. It loosened up. It said, let me loosen you up. It's called a warm-up. And then you get on into your message. But Jesus spoke to the people on that level. It's the greatest time for young preachers. Now, it's so much information out there on your phone. All the books I have bought down through the years, I was embarrassed when I was showing a young preacher my library. I got over $100,000 in books that I've been buying since I was a teenager, just whole walls of books. And I said, look, boy, you know what I spent for these books? Look, this is what he laughed. I said, what are you laughing about? He said, I got all that on my phone, Reverend. I got mad. What? He said, I got all these on my little phone. And I went and got me an iPhone and started downloading all these apps just to see. And that's the truth. Young preachers, there's so much wealth of material out there, all in the air, on Google, all kind of sermons that you have that we did not have. You can be just sitting, waiting on your food or whatever, the restaurant, and still reading. It's just everywhere. Information is everywhere now. But you got to remember who you're preaching to and forget who you're preaching for. It's not about preaching to get money. If you do what God said do, He will take care of you. I feel sorry, and let me say this to preachers out there working. Your job is preaching. You need to trust God. I was working on a job and trying to pastor a little church. And I couldn't study. I came home tired. I didn't feel like preparing. And I didn't give the people. Yes, I wrote on my gift, but I knew I wasn't prepared. How can I get you out of the ditch when I've been down there in the ditch with you? And you want me to give you a word and pull you out? No. I told the Lord, I said, listen, God, if you want me to preach, you're going to have to take care of me. I told him, and I quit my job, and I went to preaching. And when I did that and sold out to God, before I knew it, I was getting revivals here, revivals there, that helped take care of my rent, paid my bills for my wife and I, and my preaching skills developed. And as a result of quitting that job and going on out, selling out, and trusting God, I got called to church. Then I got called to another church. Then I got called to another church. And I ended up here in Mount Carmel Baptist Church because I stepped out and devoted myself to the ministry. Now, when it comes to preaching, I like to say it like this. Even if you're not a real great preacher, no matter about the thinness of your sermon, as long as you stick with the thickness of the text.
Paul said to Timothy, I give you this charge. Preach the word in season and out of season.
This is
I charge thee.